There comes a moment in life when everything changes with a single word from God. Men spend years pushing against locked doors, praying through sleepless nights, carrying burdens that seem impossible to bear, wondering if heaven has forgotten their names. They stand before obstacles that no amount of strength, intelligence, or determination can overcome. Yet there is a truth that echoes throughout history, a truth that has comforted the weary and strengthened the brokenhearted. When God says yes, no force on earth can stand against his purpose. When God opens a door, no person can shut it. When his hand begins to move, mountains tremble, chains break, and lives are transformed forever. Many people live with the mistaken belief that their future rests entirely in human hands. They think that success depends on powerful connections, favorable circumstances, or the approval of others. They spend countless hours trying to force opportunities into existence, desperately attempting to create a path where none exists. But the story of faith has never been the story of human power. It has always been the story of divine intervention. Again and again, God has demonstrated that he is able to do what people cannot. He specializes in impossibilities. He delights in opening doors that the world insists will remain closed forever. There are people listening today whose hearts are heavy because they have encountered rejection after rejection. Perhaps you prayed for an opportunity that never came. Perhaps you invested years in a dream that seemed to collapse before your eyes. Perhaps you stood before closed doors and wondered whether God had abandoned you. You watched others move forward while you remained in the same place, waiting, hoping, questioning. In those lonely moments, doubt begins to whisper dangerous lies. It tells you that your prayers are pointless, that your future has already been decided, that your best days are behind you. But those whispers are not the voice of God. The God who created the heavens and the earth has never been limited by human circumstances. He is not intimidated by impossible situations. The same God who parted seas, brought water from deserts, and raised nations from obscurity still reigns today. His power has not diminished. His promises have not expired. His plans have not failed. There are seasons when God says, wait. There are seasons when he says, not yet. And there are moments when heaven declares, now is the time. The difference between human timing and divine timing is greater than we can imagine. Human beings see only the present moment, but God sees the entire journey from beginning to end. He knows which opportunities will strengthen your faith and which ones will destroy your peace. He knows which doors lead to blessing and which lead to heartbreak. What we often interpret as rejection may actually be protection. What feels like delay may be preparation for something far greater than we expected. Think about how many times people in history found themselves trapped by circumstances beyond their control. They faced enemies stronger than themselves, obstacles taller than mountains, and situations that seemed hopeless. Yet everything changed when God decided to act. One word from heaven altered the course of nations. One divine command opened pathways where none existed. The impossible suddenly became reality because God's yes carries authority over every earthly limitation. There is a remarkable difference between human approval and divine favor. Human approval comes and goes. It depends on opinions, emotions, and changing circumstances. People may celebrate you today and ignore you tomorrow. Doors opened by human strength often close just as quickly. But when God opens a door, his favor accomplishes what years of striving could never achieve. His blessing reaches places your abilities cannot reach. His wisdom creates opportunities your mind could never design. Too many people exhaust themselves trying to open doors that God never intended for them. They chase after relationships that continually disappoint them. They pursue ambitions that leave them empty. They force situations that produce frustration instead of peace. Yet sometimes the greatest act of faith is not forcing a door open, but trusting God enough to walk away and wait for his direction. Waiting is one of the hardest lessons in life. We live in a world obsessed with speed. We want immediate answers, instant success, and quick solutions. We grow restless when things do not happen according to our schedule, but faith often grows strongest in seasons of waiting. It is in those quiet moments when prayers seem unanswered and progress appears invisible that God is shaping the heart. Perhaps you are standing in such a season right now. You have prayed for your family. You have prayed for your finances. You have prayed for healing, restoration, and guidance. You have wondered how much longer you must endure uncertainty. Yet even in your waiting, God is at work. Though you cannot see His hand, He is arranging circumstances. Though you cannot hear His voice, He is preparing the path ahead. Heaven is never inactive. Many people believe that God's blessing means a life without struggle, but that is not how faith works. Sometimes the road toward God's yes passes through valleys of disappointment. Sometimes doors close before the right one opens. Sometimes storms arrive before the breakthrough. Yet every difficulty has the potential to deepen our trust. Every challenge invites us to rely not on our own understanding, but on the wisdom of God. Fear is one of the greatest enemies of faith. Fear convinces people to remain where they are because they are terrified of what lies ahead. Fear whispers that failure is inevitable. Fear magnifies obstacles until they appear impossible to overcome. But faith sees beyond present circumstances. Faith believes that the God who opens doors also provides strength to walk through them. How many opportunities have been missed because people listen to fear instead of faith? How many dreams have been abandoned because discouragement became louder than hope? The world is filled with people who settled for less because they doubted God's ability to lead them into something greater. Yet God's invitation remains the same. Trust Him even when you cannot see the outcome. When God says yes, doors begin to open in unexpected ways. Relationships are restored. Broken families find healing. Opportunities appear where none existed before. Strength rises within weary hearts. The impossible slowly becomes possible. Not because circumstances suddenly become perfect, but because God's presence changes everything. There are moments when divine favor cannot be explained by human reasoning. People may look at your life and wonder how you overcame the obstacles before you. They may ask how you survived seasons that should have destroyed you. The answer is not found in talent, wealth, or influence. The answer is found in the faithfulness of God. His hand carries people through storms they never thought they could endure. Yet there is another side to this truth that must not be ignored. Sometimes people ask God to open doors while refusing to surrender their own hearts. They seek blessing without obedience, success without humility, and victory without faith. But God's greatest desire is not simply to improve our circumstances. His greatest desire is to transform our souls. A door opened by God is not merely an opportunity for personal advancement. It is an invitation into deeper trust, greater purpose, and closer fellowship with Him. True blessing is not measured by wealth, status, or comfort. It is measured by the peace that remains when everything else fades. It is measured by the confidence that comes from knowing that your life rests securely in God's hands. The world offers countless promises, but many of them lead only to disappointment. It tells people that happiness can be found in possessions, achievements, and recognition. Yet history is filled with successful individuals who possessed everything the world admired and still felt empty inside. The human heart was created for something greater than temporary satisfaction. It was created for a relationship with the one who gives meaning to every blessing. This is why faith matters so deeply. Faith is not blind optimism. It is not wishful thinking. Faith is confidence in the character of God. It is the assurance that His wisdom exceeds our understanding and that His love remains constant even in difficult seasons. Faith believes that closed doors are not the end of the story. Faith understands that God's no is sometimes as merciful as His yes. There may be someone listening who feels forgotten today. You have carried disappointments for so long that hope itself feels dangerous. You have experienced so many setbacks that you hesitate to believe anything good could still happen. You have watched doors close again and again, until your expectations have grown small. But do not mistake delay for abandonment. Do not confuse silence with absence. The God who formed the stars knows your name. He sees every tear, hears every prayer, and understands every fear hidden within your heart. Nothing surprises him. No failure is too great for his grace. No mistake is too powerful for his mercy. No obstacle is too large for his strength. Human beings measure possibilities according to what they can see, but God operates beyond those limitations. He works in ways we cannot predict and accomplishes purposes we cannot fully comprehend. Often, the greatest breakthroughs come after the darkest nights. The moments that seem most hopeless become the very places where God's power shines brightest. A closed door may simply be directing you toward a better path. A delay may be positioning you for a greater blessing. The chapters of your life that seem filled with disappointment may ultimately reveal the wisdom of God's plan. There is peace in surrendering control. There is freedom in trusting that God knows what He is doing. The burden becomes lighter when we stop trying to carry the future on our own shoulders. We were never meant to control every outcome. We were meant to walk by faith, trusting the one who sees beyond the horizon. When God says yes, no enemy can prevent His purpose. No obstacle can stop His plan. No criticism can silence His calling. The world may oppose you, circumstances may challenge you, and doubts may surround you, but divine purpose remains stronger than human resistance. The God who opens doors possesses authority over every kingdom, every situation, and every season of life. Yet His greatest gift is not success or prosperity. His greatest gift is Himself. For what good are open doors if they lead us away from the one who opened them? What value is achievement if it leaves the soul empty? The greatest blessing is not found in the opportunities we receive, but in the presence of God that sustains us through every triumph and every trial. Life moves quickly. Opportunities come and go. Strength fades. Possessions disappear. But the promises of God endure forever. Long after earthly achievements are forgotten, His faithfulness remains. Long after temporary victories have passed away, His love continues unchanged. So if you find yourself standing before closed doors today, do not lose heart. Continue to pray. Continue to trust. Continue to believe that God is working even when you cannot see the evidence. Hold on during the waiting seasons. Remain faithful in the difficult moments. Refuse to surrender to despair, for there will come a day, perhaps sooner than you imagine, when the answer arrives. The door you could not open will swing wide. The path you could not see will become clear. The burden you carried will be lifted. And in that moment, you will understand that God was never absent. He was guiding every step, preparing every detail, and orchestrating every circumstance according to His perfect wisdom. And when that day comes, you will look back at every disappointment, every delay, every unanswered question, and realize that none of it was wasted. The struggles strengthened your faith. The waiting deepened your trust. The hardships prepared your heart for the blessing that was coming. Because when God says yes, all doors open, not by human power, not by human wisdom, and not by human effort alone, but by the sovereign hand of the one who holds the keys to every future. His timing is perfect. His purpose is sure. His promises are trustworthy. And if God has spoken, if He has opened the way, if His hand is upon your life, then walk forward without fear. Trust Him without hesitation. Believe Him without doubt. For the God who opens doors has never failed, and He never will. The journey of faith is not measured by the number of victories we celebrate, but by the number of times we continue walking when we cannot yet see the destination. There are seasons when heaven seems silent, when prayers rise from aching hearts and no answer appears to come. In those moments, many people are tempted to give up. They assume that because the door has not opened, it never will. They begin to settle into disappointment, building homes in places where God only intended them to pass through. But the silence of God should never be mistaken for the absence of God. The farmer does not dig up the seed every morning to see whether it has begun to grow. He trusts the process. Beneath the surface, unseen forces are already at work. In the same way, there are countless things that God accomplishes in secret before his blessings appear in public. The greatest miracles often begin in hidden places. They begin in whispered prayers uttered in empty rooms. They begin in tears that no one else notices. They begin in moments of surrender when a weary soul finally says, "Lord, I cannot carry this any longer." Heaven pays attention to those moments. God sees what others overlook. While the world celebrates visible success, God works in the depths of the human heart, shaping character, building endurance, and teaching dependence upon him. Many people want the blessing, but they resist the preparation that comes before it. They desire open doors, yet they do not understand that every opportunity carries responsibility. God is not merely interested in changing your circumstances. He is concerned with the condition of your spirit. He knows that a blessing received too early can become a burden instead of a gift. He knows that success without wisdom can destroy a person just as surely as failure can discourage him. That is why divine timing matters. God does not operate according to our impatience. He works according to his perfect knowledge. Consider how often people pray for strength while hoping to avoid every hardship. Yet strength is rarely formed in comfort. Courage is not developed in ease. The strongest faith is often forged in seasons of uncertainty, when every visible sign seems to contradict the promises of God. It is easy to trust when every door is open and every path is smooth. It is far more difficult to trust when the future remains hidden behind shadows. And yet those are the moments that reveal the true condition of the heart. There are individuals who once dreamed boldly, but have slowly allowed disappointment to steal their confidence. Life has wounded them. Failures have exhausted them. Betrayal has hardened them. They still speak of God, but deep within they wonder whether his promises apply to them anymore. They hear stories of blessings in the lives of others, but secretly question whether their own season will ever come. They have become experts at surviving, yet strangers to hope. If that is where you find yourself, remember that God's plans are not limited by your present circumstances. The pages of history are filled with men and women who believed their opportunities had passed them by, only to discover that heaven had been preparing something greater all along. Human beings focus on clocks and calendars, but God focuses on purpose. He is not constrained by age, background, education, or failure. The same God who breathes life into barren places can restore dreams that seem long dead. Sometimes God allows doors to remain closed because he is teaching us that our identity cannot depend on success. The world trains people to measure their worth by accomplishments, possessions, and recognition. It tells them that they matter only if they achieve enough, earn enough, or impress enough people. But such foundations are fragile. Careers change. Wealth disappears. Applause fades. If our sense of value depends upon those things, we will spend our lives chasing approval that can never satisfy the soul. God offers something greater. He offers an identity rooted not in performance, but in his love. Before any door opens, before any blessing arrives, before any victory is won, he calls people to rest in the truth that they are known by him. The creator of the universe sees beyond titles and achievements. He sees the fears hidden behind smiles, the questions buried beneath confidence, and the wounds concealed beneath strength. That is why faith requires humility. Pride insists on controlling the future. Pride believes that success is earned entirely through human effort. Pride grows impatient with waiting and angry with obstacles. But humility recognizes that every good gift ultimately comes from God. Humility understands that life itself is a blessing we do not deserve. Humility kneels before heaven and says, "Your will be done, even when I do not understand." And there are times when understanding comes much later. There are prayers that seem unanswered for years, only to reveal their purpose in ways no one expected. There are disappointments that eventually become testimonies. There are losses that uncover hidden blessings. Looking backward, people often discover that what felt like rejection was actually redirection. The job they desperately wanted would have led them away from their calling. The relationship they mourned would have brought pain instead of peace. The opportunity they missed created space for something far better, yet such perspective rarely comes in the moment. In the midst of uncertainty, people struggle to trust. They ask difficult questions. Why does one person receive an answer quickly while another waits for years? Why do some doors swing open while others remain firmly shut? Why do the righteous suffer while the wicked prosper? These questions have echoed through generations, and they remind us of the limits of human understanding. We see fragments. God sees the whole picture. We stand at the edge of time, viewing only a single moment, while God sees eternity. His wisdom extends beyond what our minds can comprehend. The very things that confuse us today may one day become the evidence of his faithfulness. There is a danger in becoming so focused on the destination that we forget the importance of the journey itself. Many people believe that joy lies somewhere in the future, after the promotion, after the marriage, after the financial breakthrough, after the dream becomes reality. They postpone gratitude, convincing themselves that peace will come once the next door opens. But life cannot be lived entirely in anticipation of tomorrow. God teaches his children to trust him not only for future blessings, but also for daily provision. Even in seasons of waiting, there are gifts to be found. There is wisdom to be gained. There is character to be formed. There are lessons that can only be learned in the wilderness. The desert is never pleasant, but it often becomes the classroom where faith matures. It strips away illusions of self-sufficiency and reminds people of their need for God. And perhaps that is one of the greatest miracles of all. Not merely that God opens doors, but that he changes hearts along the way. The person who emerges from a season of testing is rarely the same person who entered it. Suffering has a way of revealing priorities. Trials expose weaknesses that prosperity often conceals. Difficult seasons force people to ask questions they would otherwise ignore. What truly matters? What remains when everything else is stripped away? What foundation can withstand the storms of life? These questions lead beyond temporary concerns and into eternal realities. For every human being, regardless of status or success, must eventually confront the deepest need of the soul. Wealth cannot satisfy it. Fame cannot silence it. Achievement cannot erase it. There is within every person a longing for meaning, a desire for peace, and a hunger for something greater than this world can provide. That longing points beyond earthly doors to a greater invitation, an invitation into a relationship with the God who created us. For what does it profit a person to gain every opportunity and yet remain separated from the one who gives life its purpose? The greatest door that God opens is not the door to success, influence, or prosperity. It is the door of grace extended to those who recognize their need for him. Every heartbeat, every sunrise, every breath is a reminder of his mercy. Yet so many people rush through life distracted by temporary concerns, unaware of how deeply they need the presence of God. They chase ambitions, accumulate possessions, and pursue recognition, all while neglecting the condition of their souls. And then, when trials come, as they inevitably do, they discover that the foundations upon which they built their lives cannot support them. Storms have a way of revealing what is real. When health fails, when relationships fracture, when uncertainty fills the future, superficial faith begins to crumble. In those moments, people discover whether their trust rests in circumstances or in God himself. The winds of adversity do not create faith, they expose it. And yet, even in the storm, God remains faithful. He does not abandon his people in their darkest moments. He walks with them through valleys they never expected to enter. He strengthens them when their own strength fails. He comforts them when sorrow becomes overwhelming. Often, his presence becomes most real not on the mountaintop, but in the depths of suffering. There are stories untold, prayers unanswered in ways we cannot yet understand, and chapters still being written. There are people standing at the threshold of breakthroughs they cannot yet imagine, wondering whether they have the strength to keep believing. There are hearts growing weary in the waiting, souls wrestling with disappointment, and lives hanging between promise and fulfillment. And in the midst of it all, the voice of God continues to call his people to trust, not because the road is easy, not because the answers are immediate, but because his character remains unchanging even when everything else shifts around us. For beyond every closed door, beyond every unanswered question, beyond every season of uncertainty, there remains the steady assurance that the God who began the work is still moving, still preparing, still arranging circumstances that human eyes cannot yet perceive. As you leave this moment and return to the responsibilities, struggles, and uncertainties of your own life, remember this truth. The doors that matter most are not opened by human strength, wealth, or influence. They are opened by the hand of God. You may be standing before obstacles that seem immovable. You may have prayed for years without seeing an answer. You may feel forgotten, discouraged, or exhausted from waiting. But do not allow your present circumstances to convince you that God has finished writing your story. The same God who guided generations before you is still at work today. He sees every tear you have cried in secret, every prayer you have whispered in the darkness, and every burden you have carried alone. What appears impossible to you is never impossible to him. One word from heaven can change everything. One moment of divine favor can accomplish what years of human effort never could. So hold on to your faith when the door remains closed. Keep trusting when the path ahead is unclear. Keep praying when heaven seems silent. For God's delays are not his denials, and his timing is never late. The doors he closes are closed for a reason, and the doors he opens no power on earth can shut. And when that day comes, when God finally says yes, you will understand that every struggle had a purpose, every season of waiting had meaning, and every setback was preparing you for something greater. Until then, walk forward with courage, stand firm in faith, and never forget that the God who holds the keys to every door also holds your future securely in his hands.